What is up, down, and sideways, fellow Earthlings? Welcome to League on Lock for one of everybody's favorite countdown episodes as we go back in history and look at the 5 best players from a specific role or position. And today we are talking and taking a vacation up to Top Lane Island and taking a look at the 5 best top laners of all time in LoL eSports. And as is the same with any of these lists, there's going to be a very heavy Korean representation on these lists because they've been the best region for so many years, despite what happened in 2018. Over the longevity of League of Legends as a competitive game, we know that Korea and the LCK have been the very best. And as per usual, before we get into the actual top 5, we got to give a couple of honorable shout outs to some players that came up just short of reaching that top 5. And the first guy we got to talk about is one of many former SKT top laners. We are talking about Huni. This guy, he went to Worlds with Europe, he's gone with Korea, he's gone with North America now, he's played all over the globe. Nobody expected him to be as good as he was when he burst on the scene in 2015. And for all the memes that circulate around him for Lucian top and never playing any tanks, people seem to completely dismiss his time on SKT, especially because they lost in the finals and it was the first time that they had ever done that. But alongside Faker, Huni was clearly the second best performing player throughout the entirety of that World Championship for SKT, and he also completely dominated that entire spring split in 2017. Obviously on Fnatic, Huni showcased that he can perform with the very best of the best after he completely obliterated his way through Europe. I think time and time again, even though Huni has countless moments where you are left scratching your head with him just dying unnecessarily, the sheer potential that he has for outplay and carrying a game and just completely taking over for any squad is why he's still looked at as one of the most dominant top laners when he's at his peak and when he's online. Obviously, at times on Clutch and Echo Fox, a little bit of that NA gene got the best of him, and you saw him dying a little bit too much. But towards the end of 2019, with Clutch and the rebrand to Dignitas, he really found that former form that we saw out of Huni on Fnatic, SKT, and Immortals even. We forget how dominant he was on that roster and how insane his LCS win percentage was up until, the second half of his time on Echo Fox. He has been absolutely incredible wherever he's played. Another SKT top laner to shout out is Duke. He was there 2016 for the World Championship run for them, and even before that, he played at an MVP level before he was on SKT. Obviously on Invictus, he's taken a backseat to the Shy with good reason because he's absolutely incredible, but Duke, for a solid 3, almost 4-year stretch, he was a absolute world-class top laner. He delivered on that international stage, and remember, even though he didn't play as many games as the Shy at the 2018 World Championship, he did play some games, and he is still the only player to win 2 World Championships with 2 different teams because Faker ain't leaving SKT anytime soon. You can imagine that may be a record that sticks around for a very long time. The biggest impressive performance for a lot of guys' careers was that semifinal against the Rocks Tigers, where you would think you would get tilted after that Ash arrow game. It was Duke who ate the arrow while he was being teleported, but he bounced back to have a super solid performance in that 5th game and in almost all the important matches during his tenure on SK Telecom. He showed up in a big way. Khan is another guy that you could maybe talk about. If he continues playing, he will probably play his way onto this list. And someday, MVP in Korea, if he wasn't, stuck moseying around the Academy Leagues in North America, maybe he would have the chance to also push himself into that category of being one of the 5 best top laners of all time. But for now, those guys fall just short of the list, but there's no question they are all-time greats. let's get to the big boys, the top 5 of all time. And it is actually someone from North America. He's a resident of North America now, of course. Not at all where he started his career. We're talking about Team Liquid's Impact, and that's right, the 3rd former top laner of SKT that we will be mentioning for now. He's a world champion way back in 2013. Obviously, everyone on that SKT roster was incredibly talented and top 2 in their role for pretty much at least a full year span that you were talking about. And 2 LCK titles with that SKT squad. 4 now. He's part of the back-to-back train here with Team Liquid in North America. Those world quarterfinalist berths came with Cloud9, and even on Team Impulse, him and Rush were clearly the best part of that roster. So pretty much wherever Impact has played, I think he's performed at a fantastic level. Maybe at times in his career early on in 2018 with Team Liquid, he was looked at as a weak point internationally whenever they matched up. But in 2019, I think he completely turned that around, and he has proven himself on that international stage on pretty much every team that he's had the opportunity to do that. You remember the top die memes on Cloud9. They weren't memes. He was just solo killing people left, right, and center and turning around 1v2 plays against whatever caliber of competition. We know that he's very different than someone like Huni, where Impact is going to be on tank duty much more often than somebody like Huni, but we've seen him perform on tanks and hard carry some games. Even when Shen gets reworked a couple of different times, that is still one of the picks that he's absolutely comfortable on. We saw it in the 2019 Summer Finals against Cloud9. He was able to pull that out. He will always and forever be able to play that champion, and you know what? That should be the case when you have a World Championship skin for a certain character, and Impact absolutely lives up to that pedigree, and we have still seen him play carries throughout his career when the meta does call for it. We've seen him have some pop-off performances again, even in 2019. There were some Aatrox games where he was playing absolutely insane. He had some Jace performances. So for a guy who's been playing for so long, since way back in 2013, and you maybe saw signs of maybe slowing down. Oh no, Impact's going to be washed up. Former SKT player coming to North America. He has absolutely stayed true in his career and consistently been one of the best top laners in North America, and continued to demonstrate that SKT pedigree when it comes to that international stage, regardless of the roster that is around him. So put some respect on Impact's name as he comes in at number 5 on our top 5 top laners of all time. Coming up after the break, we are rolling on to the number 4 and 3 and 2 and 1 eventually, and we love to talk about longevity, but sometimes domination needs its respect. Welcome back, you beautiful souls, to League Unlock as we continue our countdown, or ranking, whatever you want to call it, of the greatest top laners in the history of the game. And you know the criteria coming in here. There's a lot of different variables you've got to account for. You can talk about titles, individual performance, longevity, and peak performance. But sometimes, now longevity is very important, and we always say that. It's much more impressive to be solid for 6 years than fantastic for 1 split. But sometimes the absolute level of domination that you show for a full year trumps that longevity factor. That's exactly the case for number 4 on our list, and it's yet another SKT top laner. We're talking about Maurin in that top lane, and while his career with SKT, at least on the main roster, he played on the sister team for a year before that, but he wasn't there for that long because we know SK Telecom likes to go through top laners pretty darn quickly, but the peak performance and highest of highs that we saw from Maurin was unmatched at the time, and still to this day remains some of the highest level of play that we've seen out of a top laner in the history of the game, which is why maybe he wasn't at the top for 4 or 5 years, but when he was there, he was absolutely insane. And it's very rare that on an SKT roster, especially prior to 2019, that you would talk about another player outshining Faker on that roster because he cast such a massive shadow that even when Bang was performing well, it was kind of like, yeah, you know, Bang's a great AD carry, but Faker's Faker. He's the best player in the world. Well, at times, you saw Maurin playing at such a high level that, you know, we got MVP for 2015 at the World Championship, and he absolutely deserved it. He was just an absolute machine and obliterating opposing top laners at that tournament. And you know he loved to play carries, he loved to split push, but look at that Maokai win percentage. Of course, 2015 is kind of when Maokai was completely busted, but 46-10 is absolutely disgusting. To have an 80% win rate when you've played more than 50 games on a champion is something you do not see very often. But, I mean, the reason Maurin isn't higher is obviously because after he left SKT, there was a pretty significant decline in his play when he was still good on LGD for a little while, and then obviously he ended up coming back to the LCK on Afrika, and he never got close to matching that peak performance that we saw out of him on SKT. But because of how good he was for that full year, and he still had another year plus of solid play out of him on different teams other than SK Telecom, I think he's absolutely deserving of being on this list. He's kind of comparable to somebody like Dandy when you're talking about junglers, where he was just an absolute mainstay and innovative player and pioneer in the role in the somewhat early days. Season 5 isn't that early, but I mean, Season 10 is approaching real fast, so Season 5 is still half a decade ago. But Maurin, we know he played a whole bunch of different champions. I mean, you're seeing him play Morgana top. That was definitely not something you saw too frequently. Fizz top AD, he could play tanks, he could play carries, and that's obviously the biggest testament to being a championship and world-class top laner, is being able to play both sides of the coin to that world-class level. And there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that Maurin did that for multiple years, stretching across the LCK and the LPL, peaking in 2015, of course. And talking about how important longevity is, just highlighted Maurin's career, where he doesn't necessarily have that same pedigree as Impact, who's been around for so long. Well, this guy is still very young in his career, and there is not much of a doubt in my mind that he will be higher on this list. And in other roles, a player like him, I think of Caps in the mid lane. We wouldn't even have him on the top 5. We'd have him as an honorable mention. But what the Shy has done in his still somewhat brief career on Invictus Gaming, the man is not even 20 years old yet, and I still think he absolutely deserves to be top 3 for top laners of all time, because we just talked about the peak performance for Maurin really being 2015. That entire year, no doubt, maybe a little before and after, but really it was one full year where he was completely dominating. The Shy has already surpassed that. It's 2018, he completely destroyed the LPL and of course the World Championship. And even though there were many slumps for Invictus Gaming in the 2019 summer split, in spring, the Shy was murdering people left, right, and center again, and then he was still, you saw those flashes in the summer split. This guy is far from washed up. His numbers are absolutely insane. He's 12-1 on Jace. He's 9-0 on Rumble, and that's 71% career win rate. He still just hasn't played that many games because he's hardly even played 2 full years. But the craziest stat is that he has a worse than 50% win rate on only 4 champions. Just think about that for a minute. Only 4 champions he hasn't won at least half of his games on, and 2 of those champions he's 0-1. He's only played them once and he lost that single game. But the highlight reel that this guy has put out in such a short career is already, I mean, you could pick any one split that he's played in so far. 2018 spring, sure. 2018 summer, sure. 2019 spring or summer. You could pick the plays just from that one split, and it's better than 99% of players' career highlight reels that we've seen. If you like making montage videos, this is the guy you want finding highlights from, because it doesn't matter if he's playing Tank Scion. He does incredible outplays here. The 1v3, 1v2 turnarounds that we've seen him do against other world-class players. I mean, it's just been absolutely incredible. The sheer dominance and just the ridiculous amount of pressure that this guy puts on opposing top laners and opposing junglers, because you better camp the top lane or the game's over. This guy's going to be 4-0 by 10 minutes and up 50 CS and just completely snowball the game out of control. You saw Team Liquid actually do a pretty fantastic job at 2019 in the MSI semifinals of holding him down, because he was destroying that matchup against Impact in a lot of those games, playing a Gnar or the Nico to really just destroy the laning phase and be up 100 plus CS. And Team Liquid did a good job of just avoiding him completely. But that had to be your game plan and playstyle, is almost just trying to isolate him away from fights. That's just the kind of force that the Shy has already put on the Rift. And I think if he keeps playing even close to this level for 1-2 more years, then there's no doubt in my mind that this guy will eventually be the #1 top laner of all time. Coming up after the break, the Shy isn't quite there yet. So who is hanging out on the top 2 spots for the best top laners in the history of the game? Ladies and gentlemen, we are back on League Unlocked, looking at the 5 greatest top laners of all time. And the previous 2, it was all about peak performance and just completely dominating the competition, even though the long and tenured careers weren't necessarily there. But for number 2 on our list, sometimes that longevity and prolonged greatness is something that you absolutely have to recognize. And the epitome of that is somebody who has been playing since not season 3 or 4, but we are talking season 1. One of the truest OG League of Legends players that we still have, and one of only 2 members still playing from the season 1 World Championship. He is the greatest top laner in Western history, maybe the most accomplished player in Western history. It is Soaz, the god and the maestro of the top lane. And yes, the highest performance we've seen him play at, no, it does not match the Shy or Maurin. But the fact that this guy has been competitive and been at the top of his region and been able to compete internationally since season 1 is absolutely something that we have to recognize. And it's just, I mean, the career accolades and number of titles that this guy has won is absolutely insane. And really, pre-season 3 and onwards is almost broken up to 2 entirely different games. And this guy is the transition between both. He played in the early days where there was no LCS. You were playing all these random tournaments. And by the way, Fnatic then was winning pretty much all of them. He was the runner-up with Expeke and the boys at one of the biggest and most competitive tournaments of all time at IPL 5, where then the dominant World Elite roster won that one. But I mean, he's been to the finals 2 times, 7 years apart at the World Championship. He got there to the semis with Origin in 2015 and 2013 with Fnatic. He's got a bunch, 5 LEC titles under his belt. Obviously, one he wasn't quite as much of a part of. So really it's 4. It's a little bit cheating there, but he has played at IEMs as well. And listen, Soaz gets a lot of flack. He's gotten a lot of deaths throughout his career. And Cyanide, in an interview, I think described it the best. He described Soaz as the kid in school who doesn't study at all for tests, just goofs around. And then when the exam comes, he does better than everybody else who studied. Everybody hates that guy. And Soaz, he would just kind of slump through the regular season in EU. You know, whatever. There's so many of these games, so I'll just wait for playoffs. But credit to this guy, when playoffs or international competition did come around, he absolutely turned it on to another level. The prime example of that came in 2017 when Fnatic started 0-4 and people were saying Soaz needs to retire. He should not play another game on the Rift. He looks absolutely terrible. And then he ended up playing a huge role in that 4-0 turnaround. He kind of clinched it for them in that tiebreaker against the Gigabyte Marines. So when the games matter and are more and more important than next, then Soaz just slowly starts playing better and better. We've seen him go toe-to-toe against the best top laners of that era, and the guy's done it across multiple eras. You talked about Maurin being incredible, and his peak was unmatched. Well, Soaz played against him and didn't get destroyed, but he also did that against Smeb. He did that against previous eras. He played against Going in 2013. Whoever was the best top laner in the world at the time, Soaz would hold his own against them. And the fact that he did that against 6-7 years plus of competition is absolutely why he is deserving of being on this list. Maybe he was never the featured carry on any of the rosters that he's been on like some of these other players, but all the titles are there and the longevity is just absolutely incredible. He deserves number 2, but he does not quite deserve number 1. That honor, of course, goes to the former best player in the world. That's right, dethroning Faker himself, Smeb of the Rocks Tigers, Coup Tigers, KT, Rolster. The early days in Smeb's career, he was not even really a LCK level top laner. He was slumming it in the challenger scene and struggling to get out of any kind of group stage action in the LCK. But when he got together with the Coup Tigers, Prey, Gorilla, and the boys is really when he started turning it on. He's still the only player to win back-to-back LCK MVPs in 2016, and that is why for that entire year, I think his peak performance was reaching, maybe even exceeding that of what we saw from Maurin. And when he came into Worlds 2016, he was the consensus best player in the world coming into that event. He was number 1 in everybody's top 20 rankings, and that was the first time you had coming into a world championship that Faker was playing in that he wasn't number 1, and I don't think there was really an argument against it. He could play whatever champion you wanted, and it was, you know, it's really the LCK that you see top laners be the featured carry. No other region really did that very much, but Maurin did it to an extent, but Smeb was really the first, okay, this guy is our featured carry, he's the man to watch, he's going to pop off and carry some of these games, and he absolutely did that on the Tigers because Kuro was almost, you're just there to go even, man, so that Smeb can completely carry some of these games. And I mean, he's playing characters like Riven to completely do that. I think he absolutely lived up to the hype at 2017 Worlds, or 2016 Worlds, excuse me, and he showcased that he is world-class and deserving of that number 1 title. Obviously, he did not get to the finals because he played against SKT in the semis, but if they had won that series, I think it is a completely, obviously revisionist history, but a completely different look on the overall landscape of the competitive scene if the Tigers were able to get to those finals. And we're probably even praising Smeb to an even higher level. And we talked about 2016 was absolutely his peak, but people seem to forget that for 2017 and 2018, it was basically 3 full years, even some of 2015. You could say 3.5, almost 4 years, where you were talking about Smeb as one of, at the very worst, a top 3 top laner in the LCK. So he had the longevity, he had the peak performance, he has the LCK titles, he's got the MVPs. He might not have a world championship, but that is just because he had the unfortunate honor of running into SKT in back-to-back championship. So Smeb has the resume there to absolutely be deserving of number 1 on our list. But that's all the time today for League Unlocked. My name is Eric. Thank you guys for hanging out as always, and we'll catch you on the flippity flop.